All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome. What would it mean to be able to harness the power of your soul and find peace? Today, we are talking about Through God's Eyes. Welcome to the Julie Geigel Show, and this is Life Class Book Club. Today, we're talking with Phil Bolsta, author of Through God's Eyes, Finding Peace and Purpose in a Troubled World. Today, we're covering Chapter 14, Detached from Outcomes. Chapter 15, Welcome Adversity, and Chapter 16, Transcend Your Suffering. And so this kind of wraps things up here. We're at our 6 week mark. I can't believe how quickly this moves through. As you just breathe and it's gone, it's over. And so we will be having a bonus session here, meeting, if you will, next week for our members. If you are not a member of the Life Class Book Club, be sure to register over at juliegeigel.com and just click on the Life Class tab, and there'll be details there on how to join us. And so let's go ahead and dive right in, Phil. I'm going to be better at budgeting my time since this is our last week here. I'm going to project about 10 minutes per chapter. We've got the 3 chapters here for the week 6, and then our bonus week will wrap everything up. So we're going to start with detaching from outcomes over on page 366. And there's a beautiful quote by Mahatma Gandhi. By detachment, I mean that you must not worry whether the desired result follows from your action or not, so long as your motive is pure and your means are correct. Can you talk to us a little bit about detaching from outcomes?
Sure. The first thing I would say about that subject is that detaching from outcomes doesn't mean that you are apathetic and unmotivated, because a lot of people think that's what detachment is. You may still care very deeply about the result of your efforts, but from an objective, enlightened perspective, meaning you have a heightened awareness and the conviction that life is unfolding as it should, and you're fully engaged in life and doing what you can to make things happen while acknowledging and surrendering to the knowledge that a greater wisdom is at work. And really, this goes back to the reconciliation between the two lines of thought: let go and let God, and it's up to me. I do it all myself. And those sound like two opposite ends of the spectrum, but really, the key, the reconciliation between them is you do what you feel guided to do and let God take care of the outcomes. The outcomes are not up to you. You have to act with pure intent and a loving heart, and there's a greater wisdom that is going to shape the results. And you just trust that, accept that with gratitude and joy.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that I'm a very driven person, and sometimes it is one of the things I'm working on right now is detaching from outcomes, because I'm a goal setter and I'm a very driven person and task oriented, and so I'm trying to step into that place of being present and being centered. Doesn't mean that we're sitting around all day not doing anything, and it doesn't mean that we lose our productivity and that we're just running around in a daze. Even though my husband will maybe argue with me, get your head out of the clouds, Julie. What are you doing? So it, but I think there's a really fine balance, and like I said, it's one of the things I'm working on for this 2014. There's a really delicate balance between being driven and being purposeful and setting those goals, and regularly checking in to make sure you're on track where you want to be, and then really fine line between that and surrendering to the greater good. and surrendering, giving up that control. Okay, I've done what I can. Now the rest is up to you.
Well, it's really not a fine line so much as the chronology, because every single chapter we always come back to surrender, which is the cornerstone of a spiritual life. Once you surrender, then yes, I am driven and task oriented like you as well. But I do everything I can, and then if we are redirected, your attitude needs to be, oh, as you wish, instead of, no, 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 let's steer it back over here because this is where I want to go. Wait, no, get back over here. So it's really, as you wish. Let me take a second and process this. Okay, I'll go in your direction now. It's really a matter of surrender and trust. And if you really are thinking, I have to pay attention to my goals, that's your ego instead of your intuition. So tune into your intuition instead of your ego, and you will follow where you are being guided.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. I love that, definitely. On page 371, there's a quote by Richard Bach, and he talks a little bit about our alternate selves. Every turn in your life, every time you decide, you become parent to all your alternate selves who follow. Now, I've studied quantum jumping, and I use that technique with my clients. Can you speak to what Richard is referring to here with our alternate selves? It was like, oh my gosh, yay, he's talking about alternate self.
Sure. Well, the way I like to look at, I see life as a chess game, because you have, right now in this moment, you have a particular universe of choices. And with every move, that universe is reconfigured, just like on a chessboard. You move a piece, and then all the moves that are possible after that have a different universe of possibilities. So every move you make creates new possibility, eliminates old ones, and therefore, there's another quote by Richard Bach, which is great. He says, the less you know about the game and the less you remember you're a player, the more senseless living becomes. So if you know about the game and about the playing, then everything starts to make more sense. But yes, every turn in your life, every time you decide, you become a parent to your alternate selves who will follow. There have been movies made about this. About, you know what, if I took a left turn here instead of a right turn. In fact, there was a recent movie that showed, it's split screen, that here's what would happen if you took a left turn going forward. Here's what would happen if you take a right turn going forward. And all the different things that would occur just because of that one seemingly minor decision. But the person you become in each direction will be different because of the decision your previous self made about going left or right. So as you go forward, you become a product accumulation of all your decisions and experiences.
Yeah, it really is fantastic if you can wrap your mind around that idea. And, the thing that I've begun to understand as well is that, the parallel universes. And so a lot of times we have these thoughts that are coming into our minds. And I explain to people, that fear could be a real fear in an alternate reality if you made that decision and followed that step. So you can tune into that energy from that alternate self, or the exact opposite is true, because for every fear you have the success of, the alternate self who created and achieved whatever that desire was. You can tap into just as powerfully and just as strongly the energy from that alternate self who's achieved beyond measure the success in their life.
Yeah, and all the alternate selves are yourself. You're just projecting who you are now and your fears onto who you will be in the future.
Yeah, yeah. So fantastic. I know my husband actually came across a show with Morgan Freeman that explained it so beautifully on the History Channel. It was like, whoa, there it is in living color. I'm not just crazy.
Well, Morgan Freeman has a way of explaining things beautifully, yes.
Oh, yeah, love his voice. Okay, well, let's jump over to chapter 15, Welcome Adversity. And I do have one highlighted here that I want to make sure that we hit. So I think I'm going to jump to that one right away, Phil. Worry often enough for long enough, and you program your subconscious to accept worrying as the natural and proper response to life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about that? I thought that was huge because I have background as a hypnotherapist, so the subconscious is fascinating.
Oh, sure. When you worry, you tend to think that if you're not worrying about something, you're not doing your job. That worrying becomes natural, and the only correct response to a situation. That if someone is facing the situation and not worrying, that there's something wrong with them. And that you can really take worrying as a microcosm and look at that for any kind of approach and perspective on life, because everybody thinks their approach to a situation or to life is the correct approach, because they think this is the only natural way to see this. When, if they step back and look through God's eyes, they will see that worrying never helps and it always hurts. You know, worrying ruins good times, it intensifies bad times, and it recasts life challenges as waking nightmares, because your life becomes a nightmare. There's a great proverb that says, worry gives small things a big shadow. And, you know, there's also a great quote about what you worry about never comes to pass, but because you've worried about it, it actually has happened time and time again, day after day after day. So worrying is really a negative approach to life, and you know, as we're going to talk about in the bonus segment about affirmations, that's a great way to help cure someone of worrying.
Yeah, yeah, and I love how you say cure, because really you need to be cured of that. So over on page 396, Susan Taylor talks about, in every crisis there is a message. And let me find that quickly here.
Okay. Can I add one more thought?
Please.
The quote that I was thinking about, I just remembered, it was, we poison our lives with fear of burglary and shipwreck, and the house is never burgled and the ship never goes down. And that says it all, because worry is poison. Instead of enjoying life and living a loving, happy, joyful life, you're poisoned with thoughts of things that will never happen.
Yeah. And I've learned through the Course in Miracles that worry shuts down miracles and love opens up miracles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I love that. So Susan Taylor shares with us, in every crisis there's a message. Crises are nature's way of forcing change, breaking down old structures, shaking loose negative habits so that something new and better can take their place.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you will, if you talk to anybody who's trying to walk a spiritual path, I don't know if there's anyone who will say, oh, I just decided to awaken and start living with this perspective and this approach to life because it just seemed like a fun thing to do. Almost everybody comes to the spiritual path or to any kind of awakening because of crisis, because you're forced to recognize that the way you're living and what you've been doing isn't working anymore, and there has to be a better way. So adversity bears a gift when it arrives in your life. It's a shift in consciousness, gives you a shift in consciousness that deepens your understanding and appreciation of universal forces. Because In fact, just on a practical level, you hear time and time again in the world of sports that adversity is what forges character. And it doesn't, well, for example, Drew Brees, the quarterback for New Orleans Saints, he wrote a book with The Gift of Adversity in the subtitle and talks about that. And it's a very popular subject for athletes and motivational speakers, because once you take that shift and look at adversity as, oh, thank you, instead of no, anything but, then you start coming from a higher perspective, and life opens up and you start seeing possibilities.
Yes. And Phil, we're getting a crackling, and I was just wondering if you could adjust your volume a little bit. I know I turned mine down. So I was hoping maybe on your end you could turn it down just a hair. Okay. I love Helen Keller. I mean, she's got so much to teach us. And you share a quote by her on page 404. Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved. And so why do you think it is that our soul can only be strengthened through the adversity of suffering? And, what about all those people out there who don't have, don't endure? Do you think that their soul is in a different level than people who have? I mean, is the amount of suffering that you endure in this lifetime indicative of the age or growth of your soul?
No, certainly not. I mean, everyone's soul is at a different level. Maybe somebody comes into the world to be a great teacher, and they are wise from the very beginning. They don't have to suffer to get to that point. Everyone has a different life purpose. Some of those life purposes and individual karma requires more suffering than others. And it's not better, it's not worse, it's not negative or positive. It's just that particular person's life journey and karmic attributes. It's really nothing more than that.
Yeah. And do you believe that there is actually people on this earth who have never endured suffering?
In this lifetime or ever?
In this lifetime.
No, I don't, because we talked about before in a previous session about how suffering is the same for a little child who loses a toy and a king who loses his kingdom. You can't define suffering on a scale of 1 to 10 and be arbiter of that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I can tell you about Character Being Forged. I had a very idyllic childhood. I didn't have adversity or suffering to contend with in any way. And as a result, I grew up, I was not ready for life on my own. And I had to learn the hard way. And as I got into my 20s and 30s and beyond, I had a lot of catching up to do. Whereas a lot of people who have brutal childhoods or just challenging childhoods grow up faster in terms of maturity and how to live in this world. So it's neither better or worse, as I said. It worked for me. I can look back and see, I can see why that happened and why I needed to do this and to get to where I am now. But everyone's path is different. It's completely unique, like a fingerprint.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it seems to be like an ocean, there'll be a struggle for a while and then you'll get a reprieve and something else will come along and then...
Well, there's an old story about a king who asked a wise man to give him a phrase that he could use in good times and bad that would always be true. And what the wise man came up with was, "This too will pass."
Yeah, one of my favorite. And that got me through many a time, I tell
Yes.
you. All right, so
Yeah, in fact, I will say that I have somebody close to me, a good friend, who was suffering through depression. And I said to this person in the midst of their depression, "You've been here before and it's always gotten better. That means that it will get better now." And they were grateful. They said that really helped because, yeah, that's true. That gave them more hope. And they did get better faster.
wow, yeah, that's very, very powerful. And I know that you talk, I think maybe it was in the affirmations chapter about the affirmation every day in every way, I get better and better, and how powerful that can be on changing your psyche.
Yeah, that this by the name the French man who really started affirmations. That was his core affirmation that he would give people.
Yes, yeah, and that's actually the core affirmation that we were trained as hypnotherapists to
Hmm.
use in our sessions with people. That's basic hypnosis 101. Okay, chapter 16, Transcend Your Suffering. And we're over on page 425, and you talk a little bit about the Four Noble Truths. And I love when you say, you know, implicit in the Buddhist teachings is the distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is physical and cannot be avoided, whereas suffering is emotional and can be transcended.
Yeah, I made that distinction because um, if people are in great pain, great nerve pain, or whatever, physical bodily pain, and you say, well, you can transcend this. No, um, that's not something
Not
that I would
most
say
people.
to
Some
anyone.
people can, but yeah, the gurus or Buddhists maybe.
Right, if you're an enlightened master, perhaps. But that would be insensitive and just ignorant to tell somebody, hey, just use your mind and get past this. So the suffering piece of it, though, you can transcend. That's emotional in terms of, I've read so many accounts of, in fact, the Roger Delano I have in an earlier chapter who became paralyzed with transverse myelitis. Um, During the entire episode of his paralysis, he stayed in a grateful state, thanking God for whatever was happening. And he did not suffer because of it. He was, his body was falling apart, but he eventually recovered because, in large part, in fact, only because he kept that spiritual part going. So you can continue to praise God and give thanks and gratitude for all your many blessings and for the lessons and gifts inherent in what you're going through. Now, that's easy to say if it's a minor thing you're contending with, but if it's something major, yes, it becomes more of a challenge, but the core principles remain the same. It takes greater understanding and higher consciousness to continue that line of thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have about 5 minutes left. And let's talk a little bit, Phil, about the dark night of the soul. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that have experienced that or are experiencing it, and it can be pretty devastating for many people. Um, what what do you have to say on that topic and how it relates to all of this?
Well, everyone who I've read accounts of who had experienced what they call the dark night of the soul eventually comes to look at it as a gift. And the same can be true. A lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people who have depression say once they come out of depression, they say it's deepened them, it's seasoned them, it's given them a greater appreciation for life. So again, it goes back to what we talked about. When I was growing up and I didn't have any challenges, I only started developing more character when I was faced with some adversity and challenges. And you are only going to start a spiritual path if you are suffering or if adversity is just pounding on you. And a dark night of the soul is really just a greater degree of suffering. You do not have to go through a dark night of the soul. I certainly don't think that I did. I had times when I was scared of what was to come, but I wouldn't characterize it as overwhelmingly negative.
Yeah, like
But
Neely Donald Walsh. I mean, I think about his story, Conversations with God, uh, where he broke his neck and became homeless. That kind of a dark night of the soul. Right. So
that
not,
yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean dark night of the soul. What you just talked about was physical adversity. Now, if his mind went down, spiraling down along with it, that could be characterized as perhaps dark night of the soul. But a lot of people, and I talk about in this chapter, who have become paralyzed and broke their neck, look at it as a gift and think it's the best thing that ever happened to them. So it all depends on your perspective.
well, and I love Carolyn Miss's quote. So it is that an illness can come into our lives not because of negativity, but because heaven is demanding more from us. So I think, that is huge because a lot of times people feel like they did something wrong or they're being punished or
Hmm. Yeah, there's a big distinction here. Um, you are not responsible for your illness. You are responsible
90 seconds.
to it, not for it. Because again, an illness, it doesn't matter if it's an illness, a job loss, a relationship loss, something in your life is happening to give you a red flag. Excuse me, whatever you're doing, it's not working. Or there are some lessons to learn that your soul would like you to learn. And we did not intentionally cause an illness or anything of that nature, an accident, whatever. It just is happening because divine intelligence decreed that it happened. There is a reason for it. There are gifts for it. Now, if you get so sucked into the suffering of it and say, woe is me, then you are not going to have the wherewithal to look with a greater perspective to see, okay, what do I need to do to pull myself out of it? Here's where the difference comes between curing your body and healing your spirit. Because you can heal without your body being cured. You can heal on a deeper level, and sometimes that is your journey.
10 seconds.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think about Debbie Ford, who died of, I believe it was cancer.
Mhm.
And I mean, that how difficult that journey was for her as a spiritualist, because of the judgment from, and even Esther Hicks, her husband Jerry, she channels Abraham, you know, because I think that people have a false idea that if they are spiritually awakened, that they are somehow protected from all illness and disease, or that if they were so highly evolved and enlightened, that they would be able to transcend their disease.
No, if you're on a spiritual path, you will still suffer. The nature of your sufferings may change, but you absolutely will still suffer because unless you are an enlightened master, an avatar, and even then, you are still in a human body and are subject to what human bodies are subject to.
Well, and you know, we don't have control over our contract. I mean, essentially, I believe that, you know, when God comes calling, you don't get to say, I'm enlightened now. I'll pass this time. I want to stay for a couple more years.
Again, it all comes back to surrender, and no matter what happens, as you wish. And the more you walk a spiritual path, the greater higher your consciousness, the easier it becomes to greet everything with acceptance, trust, love, joy, gratitude, and those 3 words, as you wish.
Yeah. And look at what Steve Jobs did with his journey and how many people he touched the last days of his life. It really is, you can use it as a gift and a blessing, or, you can go in the corner and feel sorry for yourself.
Well, you can look on my blog under the right sidebar under the index listings, index body heroes. And
Ah,
you can I've got lots of posts about people who have, paralyzed amputations
yeah.
and who just rise above and do astonishing things because their attitude is astonishing.
Yes, and I think about that little boy who was on Oprah several times, Manny or Maddie.
Maddie.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Well, Phil, we ran over by a few minutes, but that's okay. This is Life Class Book Club, everyone. If you'd like to connect with us, be sure to register over at juliegeigel.com. Just click on the Life Class tab, and you can get more information on how to join us. We'd be thrilled if you liked us on Facebook and followed us on Twitter to keep this beautiful connection going. And remember, if you keep on doing what you've always done, you'll keep on being who you've always been. Change doesn't happen unless you make a change. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Julie.
Before we log off, Phil, do you want to give us your links to your book?
Oh, sure. To order the book, go to godseyesamazon.com. To see other posts related to the book and an overview of it, go to godseyesbook.com. And to email me, godseyes@me.com. And I'll send you a free copy of ebook I did called The Logic of Living a Spiritual Life.
Beautiful, beautiful. And thank you again, Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.